A wet hand pressed against the glass door of the restaurant. The hand was thin and old and shaking. Behind it, another hand, smaller, gripped the sleeve of a black coat that had been soaked through to the lining. The door pushed open 6 inches. A gust of winter rain blew across the polished marble floor of the entry. Two men in dark suits stood up from their stools at the bar. One of them put his hand inside his jacket. The other one moved toward the door. The room behind them was full of capos in pressed shirts, and at the far end of the long table sat the man they all called the Don. He raised one finger. The two men stopped where they stood. The frail old man in the doorway took off his cap. His wife stood behind him, soaked to the skin. He looked at the Don and said very softly, "Can we rest here?" The Don did not answer. "Not yet. Stay with me on this one." The restaurant was called Vincennes, and it sat on a quiet block in the back end of Brooklyn. From the street, it looked like nothing. A narrow door. A handwritten menu in the window. A small brass bell that nobody ever rang because the door was almost always locked. The locals knew not to knock. The tourists never found it. On most nights of the week, the dining room held maybe 12 regulars, old men playing cards in the back, a couple of widows who came for the veal, a priest who never paid for his wine. But on the first Thursday of every month, the front door was bolted at 6 o'clock sharp, and the lights in the windows were dimmed, and a different kind of room appeared inside. A long table in the center. 8 chairs. White linen. No menu. No music. No cell phones. This was the table of the Don. The Don's name was Tommaso Bellini. He was 62 years old, and he had run the borough of Brooklyn for almost 20 years without a single arrest. His hair was silver and short. His hands were heavy. His eyes never moved fast. He wore the same gray suit every Thursday, and he drank the same single glass of red wine, and he ate the same plate of pasta with anchovies. The capos around the table called him Padrone. The cooks in the kitchen called him Signor. The men outside on the sidewalk called him whatever he asked them to call him. He was a man who had buried 4 brothers, 2 sons, and 1 wife, and he had cried at none of the funerals. Not because he didn't grieve. Because he didn't believe in showing grief in front of other men. That was a rule his father had given him. Show nothing. Owe nothing. Forget nothing. That Thursday night the table was full. 7 capos and the Don. To his right sat Vincent Macario, the youngest underboss in the family, 38 years old, sharp suit, sharper tongue. Vincent had been pushing for a seat at this table for 9 years. He had finally earned it 3 months ago, after a problem in Bensonhurst that nobody else would touch. He wore a gold watch on his wrist that cost more than most men in the room made in a year. He smiled too much. The older capos didn't trust him yet. The Don watched him the way a man watches a dog he has not finished training. To the Don's left sat the older men. Aldo, who was 70 and walked with a cane that hid a thin blade in the handle. Paolo, who ran the docks and never spoke until he had finished his first glass of wine. Salvi, the cousin, who had been with the family since he was 14. The other 3 were the captains of the 3 districts the family still controlled in 2025. They were men who had survived 3 federal indictments, 2 wars with the Russians, and a divorce each. They were not soft men. But they were not Vincent. They knew how to sit still. They knew how to wait. They knew that the table belonged to the Don, and that the Don belonged to a code that had been written before any of them were born. The kitchen door opened. A waiter named Carlo came out with a tray of bread and oil. Carlo was 65 years old. He had been at Vincennes since he was 15. He knew every man at the table by their first name and their second name, and the name of the woman they were sleeping with that month. He set down the bread. He set down the oil. He poured the wine. He stepped back against the wall and folded his hands behind him and did not move. That was the rule. When the Don's table was set, the staff became furniture. Outside the restaurant, the rain was coming down sideways. The wind had been clawing at the windows all evening. The temperature had dropped near freezing. Somewhere on the street, a car alarm was going off and nobody was answering it. The Don tasted the wine. He nodded once at Carlo. Carlo did not nod back because Carlo had not been spoken to. The Don set the glass down. He looked around the table. He was about to speak when the brass bell over the front door gave one soft, polite ring. Believe me, nobody in that room had heard that bell ring on a Thursday in 20 years. The two men at the bar were on their feet before the bell finished moving. Their names were Frankie and Sal. They were not capos. They were the door. Their entire job was to make sure the door stayed shut on the first Thursday of every month. Frankie reached the door first. He pulled it open 6 inches, ready to tell whoever was on the other side to walk back out into the rain. He did not get the chance. The door pushed open the rest of the way on its own. A small old man stepped inside. Behind him, holding the back of his coat, came a small old woman. They were both soaked. Water was running from the hem of her dress onto the marble floor. Her shoes were ruined. His cap was in his hand. He was breathing hard. His mouth was open a little. He looked like a man who had walked a long way and was at the end of what his body could give him. Frankie put a hand on the old man's chest. Not hard. Just there. The old man did not flinch. He looked past Frankie's shoulder, into the dim warm light of the dining room, and he saw the long table and the 8 men sitting at it. He saw the bread. He saw the wine. He saw the silver-haired man at the head of the table, with one finger raised in the air. The old man took off his cap. He did not say excuse me. He did not say sorry. He looked at the Don and he said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Can we rest here? Just a little while. My wife is cold." Vincent Macario laughed. It was a short, dry laugh, and it stopped the second the Don turned his head. Vincent's smile went flat. He picked up his wine glass and pretended he had been about to drink. The Don set his finger down on the white tablecloth. He looked at the old man for a long moment. He looked at the old woman behind him. He saw her hands. He saw the way her left hand was wrapped around the right wrist of her husband, the way you hold a child you are afraid of losing. He saw the wedding band on her finger, a plain gold band worn thin, worn for 50 years at least. The Don did not look at his capos. He did not need to. He said one word. Carlo. Carlo took one step forward from the wall. The Don did not raise his voice. He said 2 more chairs. At my table. Carlo did not blink. Carlo turned and walked into the kitchen. The room went quiet in a way it had not been quiet before. The capos looked at the Don. The Don looked at the old man. The old man looked at the floor. The old woman was crying very quietly, the way old women cry when they have been cold for too long, and someone has just been kind to them for the first time in a week. Frankie stepped back from the door. He closed it behind the couple. He locked it. The brass bell did not ring again that night. Carlo came back from the kitchen, carrying 2 heavy wooden chairs. He set them at the Don's end of the table. He set them facing each other, with the corner of the table between them, so that no capo had to give up his seat. The old man hesitated. The Don stood up. The Don stood up. 7 capos at that table watched the most feared man in the borough stand up out of his own chair for a stranger in a soaked coat. The Don walked around the table. He took the old woman by the hand. Her hand was very small in his. He led her to the chair Carlo had placed. He pulled it out for her. He waited until she sat down. He took her wet coat off her shoulders. He handed the coat to Carlo without looking at Carlo. He did the same for the old man. Then he went back to his own seat, and he sat down and he said, "Bread. For my guests." Carlo brought bread. Hot bread. A clean white cloth in a basket. He brought a small dish of butter and a small dish of oil. He brought a pitcher of warm water with lemon. The old man tore off a piece of bread with hands that were still shaking. He passed it to his wife first. She took it with both hands. She held it for a moment against her face, just to feel the warmth of it. Then she ate. The Don watched her eat. He watched the way she chewed slowly, because her teeth were not all there. He watched the way her husband watched her, the way a man watches the only thing in the world he has left. The Don picked up his wine. He did not drink it. He set it down. The old woman laughed, very softly, at something her husband whispered to her. The capos relaxed. Vincent leaned back in his chair. The room felt warm again. It felt for 1 minute like nothing strange had happened at all. That was the minute before everything turned. Vincent Macario could not stand silence at a table. He never could. It was the thing the older capos held against him. He set his glass down too loud. He leaned forward across the table, and he smiled the smile of a man who wants to be the one who breaks the quiet. He looked at the old man. He said, "That is a nice old watch you got there, Padre. Let me see it." Vincent reached across the corner of the table, and he took the old man's wrist in his hand. He did it the way a younger man takes a thing from an older man, not asking, already holding. He turned the wrist toward the candlelight. The old man's sleeve slid back 2 inches. And there on the inside of his wrist, just below the cheap silver watch with the cracked face, was a faded blue tattoo. 3 small marks. A number. A letter. A single bird with 1 wing. The Don set down his fork. The Don set down his fork so slowly that the candlelight on the silver did not even flicker. Vincent was still smiling. Vincent did not see it yet. The old man tried to pull his wrist back. Vincent held it. The Don said, very quietly, "Vincent, let go of him." Vincent looked up. He saw the Don's face. He let go of the wrist like he had been burned. The old man pulled his sleeve down over the tattoo. He looked at his lap. The old woman put her hand on his hand. She had not seen the tattoo in 40 years. She knew exactly what it was. The Don stood up. He walked around the table. He stood behind the old man's chair. He put one heavy hand on the old man's shoulder. He said slowly, almost to himself, "Show me. Please." The old man did not look up. He lifted his wrist. He pulled back the sleeve. He turned the wrist toward the candle. The Don bent down. He looked at the 3 small marks. He looked at the number. He looked at the letter. He looked at the bird with 1 wing. Then the Don pulled back the cuff of his own white shirt and held his own wrist next to the old man's. The same 3 marks. The same number. The same letter. The same 1-winged bird. The capos at the table did not breathe. Vincent Macario went the color of paper. Now here's the thing. If you have ever wondered why old men with secrets walk into rooms they should not be in, stay with me, because the next part is the part that explains everything. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. It tells me you want the rest of these. Because this story is not about an old man asking for shelter. It is about a debt that was written into skin in 1985, and tonight, in a backroom restaurant in Brooklyn, that debt is finally going to be collected. The Don sat down, not at the head of the table, at the empty chair across from the old man. He pushed his own wine glass away. He folded his hands. He said, "What is your name now?" The old man said, "Salvador." "The same as before." The Don nodded. He said, "And your wife?" The old woman raised her chin a little. She said, "Maria." The Don looked at her for a long time. He said, "You were not at the trial." She said, "I was not allowed in." He nodded. He understood. The capos still did not breathe. Vincent reached for his wine, and his hand was shaking, and he stopped reaching. The Don looked around his own table. He said, "Gentlemen, this man at my table." In 1985, there was a robbery on Pleasant Avenue. A jewelry store. A back office. 3 men went in. One of them was 19 years old. One of them was my father, who was 40. One of them was Salvador. The job went bad. A guard pulled a weapon. The 19-year-old froze. Salvador did not freeze. Salvador knocked the weapon down and pushed the boy out the back door and took the gun in his own hand. When the police came, only Salvador was inside. Only Salvador had the gun. Only Salvador went to the wall. The 19-year-old went home that night to his mother and ate her pasta and slept in his own bed. The dawn stopped. He looked at the old man. He said, "That 19-year-old was me." The capos finally breathed. The old woman closed her eyes. The dawn continued. He said, "My father went to Salvador in his cell. He gave Salvador a tattoo. 3 marks, a number, a letter, a bird with 1 wing. My father told Salvador that the bird would fly again when the debt was paid. My father gave the same tattoo to himself. And before my father died, he gave the same tattoo to me. And he told me, Tommaso, if you ever see that bird in a room you are in, you stand up. You stand up no matter who is at your table. You stand up no matter what country you are in. You stand up no matter what year it is. Because the man wearing that bird took your life and carried it for you for as long as he had to carry it." The Don's voice did not break, but his hand on the table was shaking. Vincent Macario was now staring at the wood grain of the table like a man waiting for a sentence. The Don stood up again. He looked at his capos one by one. He said, "This is Salvador. He served 22 years for a crime my father committed and I helped commit. He came out of prison at the age of 61 with nothing. His wife waited for him for 22 years. She cleaned offices at night. She raised no children because they could not afford the wait. They have been living in a single room in the Bronx for the last 17 years. They walked here tonight from the F train because they did not have the $4 for the bus. They walked 9 blocks in freezing rain. They came to this restaurant because someone told them 15 years ago that if they ever needed help, the Bellini family on Court Street would remember the name Salvador. They have not asked for help in 15 years. They asked tonight because Maria has been sick for a month and they could not stay warm in their room any longer." The Don turned to face the old man. He said, "Salvador." He said it like it was a prayer. He said, "You sit. I stand. Until the debt is paid." Then he did the thing no man at that table had ever seen any Don in any borough do at any table in any year. He went down on one knee beside Salvador's chair. He took the old man's hand in both of his hands. He pressed the old man's hand against his forehead. He held it there. He said, "Forgive my father. Forgive me. Forgive the bird." The old woman started to cry, not softly this time. The old man put his free hand on the Don's silver head, and he said, very gently, "Tommaso, get up. We are even. We were always even. Get up. You have a table to run." But the Don did not get up. Not yet. He stayed on that knee for a full minute. The capos stood up one by one, out of respect, because that was what you did when the padrone knelt. They stood with their hands folded in front of them like men at a wake. Vincent Macario stood up last. He stood up because if he had not stood up, he would have been the only man sitting, and that would have ended him. He stood and his face was wet, and he was not the kind of man who cried. The Don finally rose. He kissed the old man on both cheeks. He kissed the old woman on the back of her hand. He sat back down across from them. He said, "Carlo, the osso buco, the good wine, 2 plates, for my guests." Carlo went to the kitchen. The kitchen had already started cooking. Carlo had told them the moment he saw the tattoo. The cooks brought out plates the room had never seen before. A whole roasted veal shank with marrow still steaming inside the bone. Hand-rolled pasta in a sauce of butter and sage. A bottle of wine that had been in the Don's private cellar since the year his father had died. They set it down in front of the old couple, and they stepped back and they bowed their heads. Salvador did not eat right away. He waited until his wife took the first bite. She took it. She closed her eyes. She said, "Oh." Just that. "Oh." Salvador picked up his fork. The Don watched them eat. The Don did not eat anything else that night. He just watched. The dinner went on for 2 hours. Nobody at the table spoke about business. Nobody made a single phone call. Vincent Macario sat in his chair and looked at his plate and did not say one word from the moment. The Don knelt to the moment dessert was cleared. The Don asked Salvador quiet questions. About the prison. About the years. About Maria's health. About the room in the Bronx. He listened with both hands flat on the table. He did not interrupt. He did not offer pity. He did not offer money in front of the others, because Salvador was a man with pride, and the Don knew the difference between paying a debt and humiliating a man. Salvador answered every question slowly. He told the Don about the first winter inside, when the heat in his block had broken for 9 days and 3 men in his row had died of pneumonia. He told the Don about the letter Maria had sent him every Friday for 22 years, 212 weeks of letters, none of them missed. He told the Don about the small notebook he had kept under his pillow, in which he wrote down one thing he was grateful for every single night, even on the nights when the only thing he could think of was that he was still breathing. The Don asked if he could see the notebook one day. Salvador said yes. Maria reached across the corner of the table and took her husband's hand, and the Don saw that her fingers were swollen from the cold, and that her knuckles were the color of old wax. He saw that, and he did not say a word about it. He only nodded once at Carlo, and Carlo went to the kitchen and came back with a small ceramic bowl of warm water and a clean towel, and he set it down beside Maria's chair without explaining what it was for. Maria understood. She slipped her hands into the warm water. She closed her eyes. The Don watched her face soften the way snow softens when it finally meets a fire. Although the oldest capo asked one quiet question. He asked Salvador if the boy who had pushed the gun into his hand had ever come to see him. Salvador looked at the Don. The Don looked back. Salvador said no. He said he had not expected anyone to come. He said a man does not do what he did expecting to be visited. Aldo nodded slowly, and he did not ask anything else. The Don's hand on the table had gone very still. He poured himself a half glass of the old wine. He raised it. He said to Salvador. The capos raised their glasses. Even Vincent raised his glass, though his hand was still shaking, and the wine moved in the bowl of the glass like a small dark sea. When the plates were cleared, the Don stood one last time. He walked to the front door. He unlocked it. He opened it. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The street was wet and shining under the orange streetlights. A black car was waiting at the curb, because Carlo had called for a black car 40 minutes ago without being asked. The Don helped Maria into her coat. He buttoned the top button for her. He helped Salvador into a heavy wool overcoat that had belonged to the Don's father and had been hanging in the back closet of the restaurant for 28 years. The coat fit Salvador perfectly. The Don had known it would. He walked the couple to the curb. He opened the car door himself. He helped Maria in. He helped Salvador in. He bent down and he looked into the back seat and he said, "You do not live in that room anymore. Carlo has the keys to a small apartment on Court Street. 2 bedrooms. A kitchen with a window. That works. It is yours." Maria opened her mouth to argue. The Don raised one finger, the same finger that had stopped 2 armed men 3 hours ago. Maria closed her mouth. She nodded. Salvador took the Don's hand through the open window. He held it. He did not say thank you. He nodded once. The Don nodded back. The car pulled away. The Don stood on the wet sidewalk and watched the tail lights turn the corner. Then he turned around and he went back inside. The capos were still standing where he had left them. Vincent Macario was at the far end of the room with his coat over his arm. The Don walked to Vincent. He did not raise his voice. He said, "You grabbed his wrist." Vincent's mouth opened. The Don said, "You grabbed an old man's wrist at my table. You laughed at him when he asked for shelter. You have the tattoo of a watch you bought for yourself. Salvador has the tattoo of a life he gave for me. You will go home tonight. You will not come to this table again. You will not lose your earner. You will not lose your respect. But you will not sit at this table. Not while I am alive." Vincent did not argue. Vincent had the sense to know that arguing would cost him more than the chair. He bowed his head. He walked out. The brass bell rang once behind him. The Don turned to the remaining 6 capos. He said, "Gentlemen, new rule. From tonight, any man, any woman, any child who walks through that door asking to rest, asking for warmth, asking for bread is seated. At any table, on any night, even on Thursday, especially on Thursday." The capos nodded. One by one. The oldest capo, a man of 70 named Aldo who had served the Don's father before he served the Don, said quietly, "Padrone. This rule, it has a name." The Don said yes. "It is the rule of Salvador." Aldo nodded. He said, "I will write it down." The Don said, "Write it down." The restaurant closed early that night. Carlo locked the door at 1 in the morning. The Don sat at the long table alone for a while. He looked at the empty chair across from him. He looked at the wine glass Maria had been drinking from. There was a small smudge of her lipstick on the rim. The Don did not move it. He did not let Carlo wash it. He told Carlo to set that glass on the shelf behind the bar, on the high shelf with the photographs of the dead. Carlo did that. The glass is still there. If you ever walk past Vincenzo's on a Thursday night in the back of Brooklyn, and you look in the window, you can see the high shelf behind the bar. 3 black and white photographs. A statue of a saint nobody can name. And a single wine glass with one faded smudge of pink on the rim. That is the glass. Salvador and Maria moved into the apartment on Court Street the next morning. Maria saw a doctor that afternoon. She lived another 9 years. They were good years. Salvador walked her to the corner every morning to feed the pigeons. He read to her at night. When she died in a warm bed in a room with a window. Salvador stayed in the apartment for 2 more years. The Don visited him every Sunday. They drank coffee. They did not talk much. They did not need to. When Salvador died, the Don himself carried one corner of the casket. He did not cry at the grave, because his father had told him not to. But Carlo, who was there, said later that on the walk back to the car, the Don pressed his own wrist to his lips and held it there for a long time, the way a man kisses a wound. The rule of Salvador is still in the book. Aldo wrote it down that same night, in the old leather notebook that has held every rule the family has lived by for 4 generations. He wrote it in pencil because the family writes its rules in pencil, in case a rule ever has to be softened. The rule of Salvador has never been softened. It has only been read aloud, once a year on the first Thursday of December, to every man who hopes to one day sit at that table. The bird with one wing is still on 2 wrists in that family, and one of them is in the ground, and the other one is still pouring wine on the first Thursday of every month. And every man who sits at that table now, when he sits down, before he eats, before he speaks, looks at the front door for 1 second. Just 1 second. In case somebody needs to rest. Because the door is unlocked now on Thursdays. The brass bell still hangs above it. And the Don, old now, white-haired, slow on his feet, sits in his chair and waits for the bell to ring again.